You're listening to Power Athlete Radio, a podcast dedicated to empowering your performance every damn day. Join former NFL pro and Power Athlete founder John Welborn as he dissects the greatest minds in strength, conditioning, and more. So whether your goal is to be the hammer, destroy mediocrity, or simply move the dirt, you've come to the right place. Now with the warm-up done, let the gains begin.
We interrupt this episode with a shameless self-promotion. Commit more, get more. Commit to 365 days of battle-tested, no bullshit programming, and we'll throw in lifetime access to our nutrition protocols plus a one-on-one consultation absolutely free, so we can craft you a game plan for 2025. I spent a decade smashing heads in the NFL and even longer building monsters in the weight room, so I know exactly what it takes to turn your strength conditioning goals into reality. So whether you want to learn to lift or crush the competition, Power Athlete has you covered. Commit to the cause at powerathletehq.com. Pick the program, then select Athlete Yearly at checkout to claim this limited time offer. Don't sit on the sidelines. Sign up today. Now back to the show.
What's the most overrated exercise in the gym programs right now? And more importantly, what's a better move that actually delivers results?
Oh, the most overrated exercise in gym programs right now. Man, I don't really know. I mean, because we don't really train in a commercial gym.
I think I can already think of something.
Yeah,
it's like you see a lot of chicks doing those glute kickbacks, to death, or like a very glute specific lunge. You know, I think those are kind of overrated if you're only focusing on the butt, for instance. Like, I'm not mad at it.
I'm not mad at it.
I'm not mad at it.
I'm not mad
just
at
saying,
any of
like,
that.
That's such a low stimulus for what you're trying to achieve. Mm-hmm. It's like, for instance, a glute kickback is just like the final 5 degrees of hip extension, which we can totally get with a sprint. You know, which is the most violent hip extension that you could get, or a jump, or a better option would just be a Bulgarian where your knee is behind the glute. Yeah. So you can easily access those positions, but organizing your whole routine around just like this really slow hip extension with the glute kickback, I just feel like that's a little overrated.
Dr. Mike Israetel. Not sure where he's a doctor, but I'm sure I could do some research. I just know they call him Dr. Mike.
I think he's a muscle physiologist.
Is he? Okay.
Yeah.
I also know he's got his black belt.
Yeah.
I would maybe one day we get to roll with him.
Yeah. Really good at DPAF, by the way.
Is he?
Yeah.
He's a good DPAF guy?
Yeah. I think you guys' games could evolve together.
Oh.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, if he's a bottom player, you know me, I like top pressure. I'm a big top pressure, but I was trying to work a little DPAF magic, and I figured out that there's some easy ways to thwart it if you know that somebody's a DPAF guy.
Yeah.
But he was talking about one of the most overrated movements is the hammer curl. I am a huge proponent of the hammer curl, so I've been using those for years. I mean, Bill Kazmaier, that was like what he felt was one of the main drivers was the hammer curl, and especially to like create that thickness in the bicep and the arm. And for years when people always ask me like, man, you're like, like even Victor the other day was like, dude, you've been doing a bunch of arm stuff. I'm like, no, because we did so much hammer curl when I was younger, like very few times did we do the rotation at the top. It was mainly always in this with the brachialis. So I disagree with him on that. And, but in terms of overrated stuff, I haven't been to a commercial gym in a while to really see what the masses are doing, but I will tell you what is not overrated is Brett Contreras and all the work that he does to like shape the glutes and some of the before and afters. Like there's some real deal. I never really thought. I kind of figured like a butt was like a lot like calves. Like either have it or you don't. Like you can really train your calves, but there's a certain genetics. Like you have a certain genetic window, like a ceiling on the calf. Like you're not going to all of a sudden go from no calves to having Lee Priest calves. Yeah. Right. I kind of figured like with like the butt the same way that like if you got like a butt that looks like God smacked you with an iron pan and like it's flat as a board, you got like a crack in your back, like to all of a sudden get something that looks like you're, walking on, like Copacabana Beach in Rio.
Yeah.
Like I didn't believe that like there was that much, you could cover that much ground. It was kind of like a genetic thing. But seeing the work that he's done, like, like the hip extension and like the thrust machine. So I'm pretty excited. I ordered a glute developer hip thrust machine. Reached out to Paul Carter, who's, real big on the peach, and I asked Paul, I'm like, what's your favorite one? So he sent me a link. I ordered it. And so I'm kind of excited because Kate and all of her ladies were like, hey, can we do more hip? And I'm like, anything that my wife can do to build, I'm like, if you want to train for this, I'm not unhappy about this at all. So if I could fuel this in the right way, I'm game to do it.
What is it? Home improvement? The guy goes, more power. Like,
yeah. She's like, oh, we kind of find it hard to load. I'm like, let me call Paul. We'll make sure we get the right machine, because I'm not going to fuck this one up. I think a lot of times, for our training programs, there is really no wasted movement. I don't know if there's an overrated stuff, just for the fact that, we've done one of the interesting ones too, that I really enjoy that we don't do enough is the Hatfield squats. We do so much, but I forget when I'm doing the Hatfield squats, I can go heavy and I can still work in compensatory acceleration. I don't think the dip will ever not be in somewhere like in my weekly, if not daily programming. I mean, I love dips in terms of an accessory movement. But I don't know. I can't really think what an overrated. I mean, you go to more commercial gyms.
Yeah.
I haven't gone in a while to go to see any fuckery.
Yeah. I think some of the fuckery actually comes from the younger generation kind of ascribing to the whole, you only need one set to failure, or, cause I think when you're younger, you have to accumulate a lot of volume. Maybe not as intense because you're not in control of it, but I think a lot of people are kind of undertrained, in my opinion. I don't think there's a lot of.
I agree with you.
I don't think there are a lot of bad movements that you can do in a gym. I think you can get on any machine and get and build some really good muscle, but I think a lot of people just don't really know where their limits are, or don't know how to train muscle action. It's like, for instance, they're not really disciplined with eccentrics, not really disciplined with pausing, and don't really know where the line is for their training.
I've never seen so many unimpressive people more worried about overtraining.
Right.
I remember I had a coach that was like, all right, like, I'll tell you when you're overtrained. And he's like, you watch, you can go back and watch Ronnie Coleman and some of those professional bodybuilders. Like, those dudes are lifting heavy poundages and they're training long hours. And I mean, like, the amount of work that those guys are doing, and like, were they worried about undertraining, or were they just under recovered? Like, it's like, you got to kind of push the bounds. I mean, I know, like, watching some of Sam Sulik's training, like, he'll do like go to failure, and then he'll do partials and kind of hit it. And, people jump in and try to educate him on it. But at the end of the day, the dude's pretty jacked. Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of guys taking drugs, and he fucking is on the road to, being a competitive bodybuilder, and is, fucking puts in the work. And is he overtraining? I would imagine, but it doesn't seem to be hurting him in any way. This episode of Power Athlete Radio is powered by Train Heroic, the most immersive strength training app experience on the market. We've built an online training business by partnering with Train Heroic to deliver all of our world-class training programs like Jack Street, Hammer, Field Strong, and Grindstone. To learn which Power Athlete training program best suits your goals, head to powerathletehq.com/training. And if you're a coach looking to build a business with the best training tech in the business, head to trainheroic.com/powerathletehq. And now back to the show.
If anything, the classics are underrated.
Yeah.
Like you said, nobody ever, I mean, you can't fail with a dip. A dip is a great choice.
So Dorian Yates had an interesting comment once. He hurt his knee and he couldn't squat anymore. So he had to go to the leg press. And when he went to the leg press, his quad development greatly improved. But then if you watch him do the leg press, it's kind of fucking frightening. I mean, he's got like every plate in the gym. I mean, his knees are wrapped. I mean, dude, the dude is literally dying on the sword for that. And they're like, was it the fact that he was able to load that machine in such a way that like all of the drive was on his quad? 100%. Like, did the squat, probably how he was squatting or what he was doing, not like hit 100% of the quad because it was other things were involved? Yes. And probably, so he was saying, like quads, or my quads got built and my legs got built to a certain point with the squat. But after a certain point, he became much more advanced, and a general physical preparation in a movement wasn't able to drive what he needed into for his quads and for his legs. But like watching him train, there is no doubt that the training drove what you saw on stage.
Yeah.
And like, I mean, there are very few people could ever handle that, level of intensity and what. I don't think that Dorian Yates was ever worried about overtraining. And if he was, he probably took he probably didn't change the intensity of his training. He probably just took an extra day's rest.
Yeah. What a great segue into the next question, because we're talking about Dorian Yates. If you want an unbreakable back, what's the short list of exercises you can't afford to skip? I mean, the dude had a back for the ages.
Yeah. He did his Yates deadlifts. He big RDL guy, bent rows, overhand and supine. So early in his career, I think he was more rotated up, palm up, and then I think after he hurt his bicep, he went to hand down. We have some videos on YouTube, and I get these arguments almost every single day from random people. So he was a big bent row guy, and he was also a big lat pull down guy. So when you train the back, you can train it this way, and you can also train it this way. So as long as you train it in those full planes of motion. But he used a lot of barbells, and he used a lot of machines. They used a low row, he used a high row. But his biggest deal, and I think the movement selection is kind of specific to each individual. Like, can you get in the best deal? I was watching a lot of stuff. People are talking about stretching at the end points. Like when you watch Dorian, I made full range of motion, but really taking the scap through that. But yeah, that guy had a back, probably the best back in bodybuilding.
Yeah,
but if you watch, I mean, like the exercise selection was secondary. He went in, he hit the movements, he absolutely eviscerated them. I mean, died on the sword for every single set.
45 minutes.
Well, and the interesting thing, people talk about one set to failure. Yeah, what they don't show you was all the warm-up sets. Yeah. So, I mean, he spent rowing, 500 pounds for reps. He did, 135, 225, 315, 405, 455, and 500. I mean, he was getting anywhere from like 4 to 7 warm-up sets before he hit his peak, which is kind of, when you look at the stuff for, like the research on hypertrophy, as the percentages get heavier and you start kind of going up and you get into that 85, 90%, especially when he's hitting like 6 to 8 reps, the margin of error is so big that, like, for example, if the driver for hypertrophy is 6 reps and you get 5, you're okay. But when all of a sudden you're talking about like sets of 30, if the driver for hypertrophy is 30 and you stop at 25, then you don't get any effect. Yeah. So it was interesting. I made this comment years ago that there was a distinct difference, and it might be in the Johnny, in the 42 Things I Learned. There's a distinct difference. There was a distinct physical appearance when I saw guys, and I knew that whether or not they trained over 85%. So I could tell you, because I would, we go in the gym, we'd lift weights, and I would watch guys like what they could put on the weight, and I'd watch what they did. And there was a remarkable difference, not only in like the physical structure of the arms, like the triceps, like just everybody's like how they were physically put together. Was very different for the guys that lifted over 85% opposed from the guys that did. I used to watch guys put 315 on the bar on a back squat, and I knew they could squat way more than 315. And they do it for like anywhere from like 7 to 10 reps. And like the 10th rep just looked like the second rep. Yeah. And they'd put it in, they'd be like, that's good. And I always remember asking them, being like, well, dude, if you can squat, let's say 500 pounds for 10 reps and you squat 315 for 10, do you think that the body's stimulating anything in terms of hypertrophy in this? No, it's not. It's not driving it. And so, especially with like the dumbbells, and we would, start pushing the dumbbells real heavy, and people are like, dude, you guys are hitting 175s on flat bench. Like, why don't you just do like 125 for more reps? Well, the margin of error increases. So if I'm trying to drive hypertrophy and I get 5 reps and maybe I leave a rep or 2 in the tank, like I'm still going to get 98% of the stimulus I needed. When all of a sudden I go press 60s and maybe it takes me, 50 reps to get that, and I stop at 30, then there's not the effect. So that's that repetitive rep model.
Kind of like swinging a tire over and over and over again.
Yeah, I mean, Chris Beardsley has a great thing, and it's his repetitive rep model. And that talk that I did on hypertrophy, that was one of the key ones about, when you go up in percentages, the margin of error increases. So like if you leave a rep or 2 in the tank when it's heavy, I still get the same effect. If I leave a bunch of reps in the tank on a lightweight, I'm not getting the effect. And I think the reason that our training, and more importantly for my own training, because I was never afraid to lift heavy weights and try to push them right to the point of failure. If, the thing I liked about dumbbells too is if I got stuck, I could always ditch them.
Yeah.
So to be able to find different ways to, train to failure, dips are another one. Like I can do body weight dips, and then all of a sudden the other day I threw on like 4 chains. So it was 80 pounds and I got like 6 dips, and body weight, I'll do like 10 to 15 dips.
Yeah.
Now, is that really the driver? No, that's the driver.
Yeah. Staying on the back as well. I think there's a couple different ways that we can train the back. A lot of people talk about the, kind of fixed torso, back routine, in one plane. They call them like sagittal sallies, just stay in one plane.
Bilateral hip hinging in a sagittal plane.
Exactly. So then you have, you also have rotation of the spine. So a lot of things that we've been implementing in our training has been a rotation of the spine, if anything through like a back extension with a twist, or even grabbing the med ball, attaching a little band to it, and then rotating the body with a little bit of resistance. I think being adapted to some rotation is also a good way for you not to pull your back, grab, playing catch with your kid. So,
yeah, the one thing that I haven't seen in bodybuilding is a lot of rotation.
Yeah.
It's just not something they do. And I think the reason why they're so nervous on rotation is maybe it makes like the obliques and the waist thicker when you do a lot of rotational work. Kind of like we'll do like the hack twists or some of that like kind of oblique stuff. So those guys are very nervous about thickening their waist. One of the interesting elements of jiu-jitsu, and this is just an element of athleticism, we talk about the ability to separate the upper body from the lower body. So can you move in these different planes in jiu-jitsu? One of the things that was most interesting when I started working with you and Victor and Philippe, and my model for athleticism has to really puts a lot of emphasis on that transverse rotation, and being interested in like terms of the model of athleticism being vertical, and now all of a sudden we're in this gyroscope, like on your back, on your side, these different positions. Can you rotate and come back? And the guys that are very good at jiu-jitsu have the ability to have their legs one way, come back, rotation, get inverted, and like that transverse plane movement in terms of like this gyroscope is like fundamental for why Victor and those guys are so good.
Yeah.
But then you sent me that video of one of the new wave guys sprinting.
Yeah.
And he had 0 rotation
Yeah.
to the point where his like he was glued, and like no cross pattern, nothing like. And so it's pretty fascinating because pretty good jiu-jitsu guy.
Yeah, very good. But also a slower pace. Like when he was going with Philippe, the guy Giancarlo, he was super slow on acting and
very deliberate.
But at the same time looked like an orc running through Mordor.
But what's interesting is he's real strong.
Yeah.
I mean, I know it's kind of like a joke in jiu-jitsu when you tell somebody they're strong. It's like the code for your dog shit.
Yeah.
He is real strong. Like watching him break grips and kind of like grab guys and like kind of muscle them. Like I remember at one point he was trying to pass and he had his hand around like the guy's like back of his neck and was like pulling the guy in, and like completely just the dude could not get his hand off, could not shake that.
Yeah.
And he kind of just bent the guy like a shrimp.
Interesting strategy. Kind of gave up the ability to move super quickly in exchange for strength. Well, it's a strategy.
But
yeah.
If the foundation is set and you put him back into a different training model, we can foster and develop that.
Yeah.
So I like training's interesting. Like the age old like what you feed comes to fruition.
The wolf that you feed?
Yeah. The wolf that you feed comes to fruition. There's 2 wolves. But it's true. Like what you feed comes to fruition, right? If you put that and you bias it in the program, and now you start doing like, like Cal Dietz's like goat drill, and we're working on movement and rotation, and like, like you all of a sudden ask somebody to, reach this way and move here, and you start putting that into the training. All of a sudden what you train is what you foster, and that will show up. Now, if the training looks like just sitting in machines and working on nothing that looks like balance or movement, and all you're doing is just pushing through fixed planes of motion, based upon the model of athleticism, the ability to seamlessly and effortlessly combine primal movement patterns through space to accomplish a known or novel task, which is power athletes' definition of athleticism and the model we use in the training space. If you put them into a machine-based system, can they get bigger and stronger? Yes. Can they put on hypertrophy? But it does nothing to foster and develop athleticism. Mm-hmm. So, they're doing so much in their training like on the mat, that should be enough, but it very well might not be. And the only way you would know is by putting those guys into the model. And, when we look at that stuff, it's kind of it's a hole that you can exploit.
So how do you figure out if an exercise is worth your time or just a filler?
Man. I think for a lot of people that don't understand the physiology of a movement, I mean, you've seen, like, we'll go in, like we were at, out in Virginia Beach working with our friends at Naval Special Warfare, and they have a ton of machines there. And I know you saw me go around and try all the different machines and be like, oh, I like this one. I don't like this one. This one's awkward. This was, because not every machine is set up for everybody.
Yeah.
So I think finding machines that allow you to not only be able to, like, move the weight in the like
intended plane of motion.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Like it is key. And there's certain ones. And then the other one too is, like, can you create tension? There was a funny exchange where people have been using the word like mechanical tension. And isn't it just tension?
Yeah.
Right. Like, and how do you get tension, right? You have to create tension in the muscle, and then you have to continue to work the reps until you feel that tension and you get to failure. And people call it mechanical tension, mechanical failure, because if you think about mechanical failure, is like, I can no longer mechanically bend my arm. Now I can tend to use motion, or I can do movement to start, like, for example, like, let's say I'm doing a row, right? And I'm here and I can pull this way, and then all of a sudden I can no longer pull this way. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to use
a sway back,
or I'm going to use just
body
cheat.
English.
Yeah. Cheat, body English, athleticism, whatever, to, like, continue to, like, pull this thing for, like, a few extra reps. So that's driving past failure, which you can safely do. But when you think about mechanical tension, and more importantly, just tension, you have to create that, and you have to find machines that you can use that allow you to do this.
Yeah.
So, there's 50 different lat pulls. I like, for me, the Sornex lat pull we have is really cool, but then there's also different grips we use. We go narrow, we go this, we change this. And so that, Tom Newman made a great point where he said 3 degrees of change, whether not only in the grip and hand, just 3 degrees, completely different set of muscles.
Yeah.
So being able to change, like, the movement and how you, like, for example, if you're in, like, a seated, like, hammer row, or, like, kind of that low row thing. So a lot of people like to grab the top handle, the lower handle. I think you need to do them all. And you need to find which one allows your movement to all of a sudden, like, drop and retract. Here I am being able to pull this all the way through, so that I can come, and just finding something that's clean and setting up a camera and seeing if the movement looks good.
Yeah.
The other great thing is you can go back through YouTube and watch videos of some of the baddest dudes on the planet, like Lee Priest and Ronnie Coleman and Dorian Yates. And you can take a look at what movements those guys are really biasing and how it looks and how they're doing it, and then use that as a guide.
Yeah. For instance, like somebody's trying to drive hypertrophy of the legs, but the back squat doesn't give them enough stimulus because of some deficit in their torso, not creating enough stiffness to be able to facilitate that. Or maybe you're like a long femored guy. We know all those guys say, oh, I just got to have long femurs. It's like, well, maybe that's just not the movement that's able to provide you enough stimulus, because you can't even do enough reps without your back giving out.
Yeah.
Right. So maybe you just got to find another movement that will help you get there. So,
finding different ways to conveniently load things and to do it well, and to push people past what they think is possible. The reps in reserve, I think, was both a good thing and a bad thing. I think to really understand how many reps in reserve you have to have trained to failure, and you have to be pretty advanced. So asking a relatively new individual, or somebody that's not extremely strong, like, how many reps in reserve? They're like, I don't know, I got it for 5. Because you've got it for 6? I don't know. Whereas I can lift a weight and I can tell you on that last rep whether or not I could get 1 or 2 more, or if I'm fucking done.
Yeah.
So, like, we squatted the other day, and I was like, hey, I'm gonna try to squat 5. I got to 4, and I knew that if I squatted 5, I wasn't going to be able to get a second set.
Yeah.
And then that way I was able to add weight, and I was continue to go up. But that's only comes from having done this for a number of years, and I'm pretty in tune. I know what I should hit. I knew what everything, and I know how it feels. And I also have to check my ego, because so what'll happen sometimes if I don't do enough hamstring work, I start to feel a little bit of tibial slide in my right knee. And it just reminds me that there's a surgery on the horizon for me, which would be nice to kind of get that paired up.
Yeah. Still got time for me, John?
Yeah.
All right, cool. We got, well, here's another one. Got any tips for cutting gym time by half without sacrificing gains? Supersetting? Giant setting?
Yeah. So I hate sitting around. And I also, through just a lot of research and just a lot of, powwowing, a lot of talking to Cal Dietz, we saw the quality of movement increase when we started pairing the movements with auxiliary accessory movements. So for example, after you squat, the movement quality of the squat improved set to set if we went over and did like a cross patterning, like reverse hyper. Or if we were doing bench press and we went and did a pull-up. So a lot of the post-activation potentiation training you see in Power Athlete and some of the French contrast that we use in Field Strong and some of the other programs comes from this desire to improve movement quality by not overloading the CNS with the same movement pattern. Mm-hmm. So we'll do something like, let's say, a compound movement, and then we'll always go find like a smaller accessory movement, whether it be body weight, this, a med ball throw, something that isn't the same movement pattern over and over again. Mm-hmm. So when you pair these, like for example, if we squat, let's say you do a pull up or you do this or whatever it goes, like it would never be like after I do a close grip, I would go immediately over and do a dumbbell bench.
Right.
Like for example, if I did close grips, it would be a dip or a pull up or maybe some like rear delt work. So I'm always looking at ways to improve the movement quality. And we were very fortunate in the training room that we had, not only from back in the early days at Balboa, but at Power Athlete, and since coming out here, to have a fairly decent amount of people to be able to watch them lift weights and then start pairing these movements. Yeah. So I like doing that more so than just sitting down. But for the most part, if you're looking to truly drive hypertrophy and strength, doing a set where you're not completely rested doesn't allow you to peak to this. So if you want to reduce the time in the gym, you're going to have to do one thing. You're going to have to improve your recovery ability by raising your aerobic capacity. Mm-hmm. So if it physically takes me 3 to 5 minutes to recover in between a movement, for most people, I don't think they're squatting 1,000 pounds in here, which if you've ever watched guys squat 1,000 pounds, they might take 10 minutes between sets.
Or getting paid to squat 1,000 pounds. Yeah. I think that's a big one. A lot of people want to train like freaking Hafthor Bjornsson, but it's like, dude, you're not.
Yeah, he's 6'9", 450 pounds.
Yeah.
But for a lot of people, if they want to reduce the amount of time that it takes them to recover in between sets to reduce their total, time under tension, let's say, within the gym, the fastest way to do it is improve your recovery by building a large aerobic base. So now I have the ability to recover in, let's say, 2 minutes, where somebody else might take 4 to 6 minutes.
Yeah.
So if you want to make sure, and you see me do this all the time, like I set a clock when we start training, and if it gets past 60 minutes, I get real antsy. Yeah. And at 70 minutes, I just fucking walk out.
Yeah.
And that's where you all of a sudden see it and be like, all right, we're done, we're out. And because I know for myself that those 2 hour marathon workouts in the gym, were a lot of fun, and we hit a ton of accessory, and we're trying to get 20 sets of body part and all this, but I just didn't see the results. Whereas my ability to get in, and I talked about this, I saw this quote that they attributed to Jason Statham, and he was sitting there and he was super jacked. I think it was when he was doing
Transporter, maybe
the Transporter, or that other one, Death Race. Mm-hmm. He talked about like the human body's a lot like dynamite. That if you take the dynamite and you hit it really hard with a hammer, it'll explode. But if you take the dynamite and you just kind of hit it over and over again, it doesn't explode. He said the body's a lot like dynamite. You can hit it hard and get out. And I don't know if he ever said that. The picture they had, like it just, typical internet folklore memes. But that's a pretty good analogy in the training. Like, get warmed up, get ready, get in a position for you to hit a maximal set, and then fucking die on the sword, hit it, and then move on. What happens a lot of times is people don't die on the sword when they should, so then they do a bunch of junk volume on the backside to try to make up for it, and all that does is cause a lot of fatigue.
Yeah.
And we're in this constant balance of like readiness, fatigue, aerobic capacity. Did I do enough? Did I do too much? And I think, putting, 2 or 3 hours in the gym, I think it's just going to be a lot of junk volume unless you're taking a ton of drugs.
Yeah.
And if you're taking a ton of drugs, I used to have a strength coach who said, hey, if you take enough drugs, you can basically go play the snare drum for an hour and get jacked. So the problem is for a lot of times, with a lot of pro bodybuilders or even like, because that's part of their sport, but even just a lot of like influencers now take a lot of drugs. Everything works when you create that positive, favorable anabolic environment.
Yeah.
Nitrogen retention's up. Everything I do works. And they see people doing all this and figure like, oh shit, like this is helping me. When in reality, it's like, you're fucking taking enough drugs to, like to put a pharmacy in Tijuana in business. And then you're, like trying to prescribe training to a bunch of dudes that aren't taking drugs.
Yeah.
It's kind of like I'm sure you see this with a bunch of guys taking TRT. I always think it's fascinating with in the jiu-jitsu circles. I'm sure you have people ask you, guys over 40, I'm not recovering and this, and then all of a sudden they think that they're going to go take a shot and it's going to magically give them this shit back, and it doesn't work like that. So
yeah, I know some guys on TRT that I'm shocked to hear them say, "Oh, I'm taking drugs." I'm
you're like, I thought you'd be in way better shape.
Yeah, I thought you wouldn't have a pot belly. Yeah.
So my brother Ed was pretty funny one time. I laugh on this. He's like, man, after we've lifted weights, all this shit we've done, I thought I'd be in way better shape by now. My brother, one of the
you need him.
One of the worst parts of living here in Texas is I don't get to see my brother Ed every single day, and I miss him. My mom is. She's a piece of work, so I'm sad to miss her too, and my brother Rob. But to be able to see my brother Ed is like we laugh. It's funny. He I think he went out the other night and maybe had some drinks because he started sending me all these sent me this this picture on Instagram, and it was the bench that the two from Red Dawn. Like the end when Charlie Sheen and Patrick Swayze basically like go on that bench, after they're all shot up, they basically like on that bench, and then the Russian dude shows up and he's like, don't worry. Don't worry, Dad's going to be here in like that moment. And so somebody took a picture of that bench, like in that deal. And it was like, like didn't say anything. He just sent me that. And I was like, you having a few drinks, feeling emotional? It's like, I miss you, dude. I'm like, miss you too, man. I'll come back and see you
soon.
But
I'm pretty sure he's like one of those dudes that gives you brutal honesty when you need it.
Well, he's a criminal defense attorney.
Yeah.
So like honesty is where those guys live. His joke is like, lie to your priest, lie to your wife. You don't lie to your defense attorney. And no, my brother is by far one of the best, most honest people I know. And he's so good at his job. He's he's got such a good perspective. It was funny. I called him the other day and they train at a CrossFit gym. And so I'm like, how's it going? He's like, we're still doing it. And I told him I was on that Jed Leinhardt's podcast. And we talked a bunch about the CrossFit. And he's like, yeah, CrossFit's for people that just want to be jacked. He's like, we got a bunch of 20-something kids at the gym. They like, all the girls are jacked. All the dudes are jacked. They probably take a bunch of drugs. And he's like, and then there's just our old dudes that just want to be fit.
Yeah.
And I'm like, yeah. And I'm not mad at it because that's great for you guys.
Yeah.
But when you start talking about athletic performance and training for something and trying to be the best in the world, it needs a more advanced model. And he's like, did anybody ever claim that CrossFit was like the advanced model for athleticism and for getting people ready for professional sports?
What a lawyer answer.
And I'm like, I don't think they did. And he's like, yeah, like it is what it is. It's general fitness. We want to look good on vacation. Like we're happy to do it. So, and it's community. So he, it was good. It's always sad to not see him, but we're going to go back in February. We'll go back in March.
Yeah.
So, dude, we got a lot more questions, but we can continue this at another time because I think we're coming up on 2 hours.
Yeah.
1
hour.
Oh, 1 hour.
I'm getting catabolic sitting here. So.
Well, we can't have Arash getting catabolic, so we'll end it here and we'll pick it up at another later date. So thanks for tuning in. Another episode of Power Athlete Radio. Hey there, Power Athlete Nation. Big shout out to all the heavy hitters who stuck around till the final whistle. If you've been soaking in the knowledge bombs and epic tales we've been dropping for free, here's your chance to be a game changer. Swing by kofi.com/powerathlete and toss a few bucks our way to keep the podcast fueled and firing on all cylinders. That's ko-fi.com/powerathlete. Your support makes a difference. See ya.